Today's discussion will be presented in 3 sections since we are recording it for a radio broadcast on Federal News Network. You're welcome to post questions and comments during the session, and we'll try to answer them online. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Justin Doubleday, a reporter at Federal News Network.
Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guests today are Sabrina Lee, the Director of DoD Programs at Okta, Chris Joseph, the Acting Deputy Director in the Office of the Chief Information Officer for the Cybersecurity Directorate at the Army, Jason Howe, A1 Chief Information Officer and Deputy Director of Plans and Integration at Headquarters U.S. Air Force, and Drew Malloy, the Technical Director of the Cybersecurity and Analytics Directorate at the Defense Information Systems Agency. Just to set the table a little bit for this discussion, it's been almost 2 years since the Defense Department finalized and released its Identity, Credential, and Access Management Strategy. And that document set out a vision of a secure, trusted environment where people and non-person entities can securely access all authorized resources based on mission need and where we know who and what is on our networks at any time. And quite a lot has changed in those 2 years. There's been this massive shift to telework, multiple cyber attacks that have taken advantage of user credentials. ICAM, though, continues to be a major priority for DoD within broader technology pushes that you hear about all the time, like Zero Trust Security and Joint All-Domain Command and Control. So we're here to break down ICAM a little bit further. And to start, I want to start with you, Drew. DISA is really at the forefront of DoD's ICAM push. Can you describe DISA's vision for ICAM, how you're getting after it?
Sure. So for us, putting together Enterprise ICAM based off of the Enterprise ICAM strategy came out from DoD CIO is really one of the top priorities of the agency as a whole. We've done a lot of work in the background for this, a lot of different efforts around supporting our rollout of Office 365, earlier the CVR environment for Office 365, and then moving to the IL5 tenants for Office 365 around Enterprise ICAM, and looking to push that towards how can we get that deployed to the farthest extent possible, knowing at some point there's going to be a number of different service-specific ICAM offerings as well, and how do we federate across those different identity stacks in order for us to have a master user record and auditability for the DoD for who has access to what within the department.
Got it. And I think DISA is offering, or putting together several enterprise-wide tools like the Global Directory I think you just mentioned. How are those coming together? How can the services and other defense organizations be a part of that?
So we have the Global Directory, as you talked about. That's really the backing of what we're doing with Office 365. Right now, that's really a service being provided for millions of different users that are using different Office 365 tenants throughout the DoD, and looking to expand that into, right now, the initial target is the financial management community. They had a very pressing need around auditability of their findings, making sure that we're able to audit it. We're able to ensure that folks cannot all, have dual personas, have different roles to where they are asking for and authorizing payments on different things. So financial management has been the first target, but looking to deploy that even wider, and then working with our service partners on what they're doing with ICAM to figure out what a federated strategy is. We also, as part of our ICAM program, put together our automated account provisioning tool, which is essentially taking what we've done from a very manual, form-based, emailing around, making sure that you get all of the right supervisors to sign off and making sure that your training is correct, to how do we automate that? How do we get it to pull from authoritative data sources to auto-populate so that you aren't waiting, days and weeks in order to get an account provision for a certain thing, and we can make that so from a workflow perspective that is optimized, and it becomes faster, less onerous from a management side, and more intuitive from a user experience perspective. And then we have the master user record, which is backing all of that, to where that's really going to be what we use to get after those auditability requirements that we have to say, how do we know what user is entitled to it? So what accesses, what are their authoritative attributes that are being used for that user in one single location, so that we can pass an audit on what we're doing for access control.
Got it. So a lot of really important foundational work for DoD's ICAM future that you just described. And Jason, if we could turn to you, the Air Force released its own ICAM strategy last June. Can you provide us an update on what you're focused on now when it comes to implementing that strategy?
Well, I would say there's good news there. In the Air Force, we have really focused on a very comprehensive ICAM strategy. And in the A1 portfolio specifically, our annual customer base is about 5 million people. A small fraction of that are CAC or PKI users. We interact with a lot of veterans and retirees and new recruits, family members, people where identity is critical. We still have to protect their information. We have to protect them. And at the same time, we can't use I'll say the legacy ICAM models of 10, 20 years ago. So what you see is the Air Force strategy is very much focused on commercial multi-factor capabilities that can scale very quickly and are, I will say, more comprehensive than what I've seen occurring in the past. And I think there's a lot of value. We care a lot about our stakeholders, and the way we protect them through Zero Trust and ICAM should be of the same security level as how we take care of our airmen and guardians. So I think that's a differentiator and something that we focus on in the Air Force.
Got it. All right. And then if we can turn here to the room, Christopher, I know the Army has been trying to evolve its ICAM strategy and requirements, especially when it comes to mobile devices and bring your own device. Last couple of years has seen a pretty big evolution there. But how much progress has the Army made over the last couple of years from your perspective, and where do you need to go from here?
All right. Thank you. And again, thanks for having me here today. As you said earlier, you mentioned about DoD and its ICAM strategy. I do want to say that the Army has its own ICAM strategy that was signed back in 2020, actually. In the development of that strategy document, we did coordinate with our DoD counterparts to make sure that we stay, lockstep in the direction they were going. So I think we've done a good job with that, and we touched on using authoritative data sources for identity and what have you. So I think we're real good and real solid in that regard. Our strategy is also very comprehensive as well. In fact, we have actually deployed an ICAM solution that's been in place now for about 5 years, and our Army systems are leveraging that solution for their identity and authentication needs. We know going forward we need to support not only customers on-prem, which we do today, but we also support some customers in the cloud as well. And we will continue to look for other opportunities to expand our identity capability. For example, work with our industry partners as we move forward and explore more and more about identity as a service going forward.
Got it. Right. And Sabrina, hearing all that, you're kind of looking at this from the industry perspective. You can kind of look across things. How are you seeing these ICAM requirements evolve, especially like Christopher just mentioned, as there's this big push to the cloud and off-prem and things like that?
Yeah, I would say I've sort of heard it from all of you guys already today, but I kind of hear 3 main categories when I talk to DoD customers. The first one that comes out is federation. The DoD wants to get really good at federating identity, and that can mean the Air Force's identity system trusting the Army's identity system. It can mean DISA's identity system trusting the VA's identity system, right? These systems all need to talk to each other and federate identities across those environments. And so what that means for me as a vendor is we have to be really good at offering solutions that use open APIs and use identity standards throughout the industry, like OIDC and things like that, to let these guys truly trust each other's solutions and federate identity across the federal government, to make that a more seamless experience for users. The second thing I hear consistently is automation. Everyone seems to be focusing on automating sort of the identity ecosystem. And that can be everything from provisioning and deprovisioning users, which I think Drew touched on, which is sort of like, when you think about a person in joining the DoD, they join, maybe right out of high school or college, they move around a lot. They take on different roles. And in those different roles, they need different levels of access to different applications or services, and then they leave and maybe transition to the VA, right? And so there's a provision them, consistently change those provisions potentially, and then deprovision them. And a lot of that can be streamlined and automated. So for us, as a vendor, we have to offer services that make that automation really easy. And then in that same automation category, I would also say, that's really user-focused, user experience-focused. The other part of automation that I hear consistently is security-focused. So automating things like Okta, for example, integrating with a SIM. So we can push threat information or receive threat information and react and respond to it in an automated way, right? If there's a cyber attack that's happening, we have to be able to have our product respond very quickly. So all of that automation work is key to offering a good ICAM solution. And then the third category, I would say, I just sort of lump into modernization. And Jason kind of touched on this, but I'm consistently hearing about the DoD trying to move to a mobile, offering mobile experiences to their users, going to a multi-cloud environment where they can actually use vendor-neutral identity services to get into all the different kinds of cloud services they're offering. Modern factors, so things outside of the CAC that can enable the non-active duty workforce to get access to these services and enable things like bring your own approved device. And then, vendor neutral solutions that handle things that pop on the market, right? When the pandemic happened, video conferencing became really important. So you had to have a solution that plugged into those systems very quickly and easily. So as new technologies pop onto the market, you want something that is modern and vendor neutral and can integrate quickly.
Yeah. And I'll just toss this out to anyone who'd like to take it, but are you guys seeing that integration? How does that happen across, perhaps the Army, Air Force, and for Drew, how does DISA kind of help foment that integration that needs to happen really across the Defense Department, which is a very obviously historically siloed organization?
Yeah, so I think from what everyone said, you can tell there are going to be multiple ICAM solutions out there moving forward, and that's necessary in a lot of cases, right? There's different use cases for what we're doing with ICAM. There's different sort of things that we're going after from an enterprise level. We're trying to take take an approach where we are supporting as much as we can, but when you get into the eaches and everys of each of the services, when you talk about having on-prem solutions that require resilience within disconnected environments, things of that nature, to where it might not make sense at an enterprise level to do that, we need to be able to federate and work together. We've been doing a lot of work with DoD CIO. They have a joint program integration office that's really trying to tie all of this together, and we've had a lot of conversations with the different communities around ICAM with what they're trying to do. For the most part, a lot of us are in lockstep with the technology stacks that we're using. It's just answering the question of how do we federate those, and then how do we roll that up so that there is kind of that common master user record, so that there is visibility into who has access to what. But how we get after federation is still something that we as a department are working on and are working towards coming up with a federation strategy underneath the CIO.
And if I can build on that, I think enterprise federation is critical. But if you go a layer down within our portfolio, for example, we work very hard to integrate across our multiple cloud environments. And we have software as a service, we have infrastructure as a service, and we use actually a commercial cloud-based identity management system to help us do that integration. Because industry has focused so much on being interoperable, it makes our lives a lot easier being able to use a commercial cloud-based ICAM solution. One of our challenges remains like within our systems. So it's great that you have enterprise ICAM as a capability, but each system then has to leverage that ICAM. So I would say we're on the cusp of some greatness, but there's still a lot of work to do.
Got it. All right. Yeah, well, we're hearing a lot of themes, as Sabrina nicely summed up here, and we're definitely going to have to talk about how we also shift from the common access card, the CAC card, as folks have talked about. But first, we're going to take a really short break. Again, my guests today are Sabrina Lee, the Director of DoD Programs at Okta, Chris Joseph, Acting Deputy Director at the Office of the Chief Information Officer for the Army's Cybersecurity Directorate, Jason Howe, A1 Chief Information Officer and Deputy Director of Plans and Integration at Headquarters U.S. Air Force, and Drew Malloy, Technical Director of the Cybersecurity and Analytics Directorate at DISA. I'm your moderator, Justin Doubleday, on this panel discussing navigating the future of identity management at DoD, sponsored by Okta on Federal News Network.